The iron law of woke projection never misses. It means accuse your enemy that of which you are guilty. In this video, I want to show how wokeism draws inspiration for its uniquely stupid and murderous ideology from history's most destructive political philosophies. I will discuss seizing the means of production and distribution. I will discuss who is to suffer and who is to benefit from being dispossessed. And I also want to talk about fascism and how its greatest cheerleaders are the so-called woke anti-fascists themselves. In my opinion, they hold uniquely stupid beliefs that are overtly false and harmful, devoutly believing that their activism can somehow rid the world of oppression. They use language to deceive or manipulate, never to communicate. They are evil people who role-play as being morally superior, and his lust for power is only matched by his constant need to virtue signal. As a movement, wokeism is a religious cult whose members believe that a system of reparations is the key to atone for past and present injustices, as well as the key to eliminating poverty, pollution, and hatred as part of the human condition, thus creating heaven on earth. As implied, central to creating this woke utopian society is the redistribution of shares on the basis of perceived victimhood for reasons pertaining to social justice. And it is my goal to offer a simplistic understanding of what it means to dispossess one man in order to benefit another. I will begin by discussing Karl Marx, co-author of the Communist Manifesto, for the following reason. Woke activists who proudly fly the hammer and sickle at protests and demonstrations use this ideology to grant them justification for seizing the means of production and distribution for the common good. The manifesto itself could easily be reduced to two words: weaponized resentment. But I think the following paragraphs from the document capture its essence without having to consume pages of jargon. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. Free man and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guild master and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. In this sense, the theory of the communists may be summed up in the single sentence: abolition of private property.
I've been reading some Marx. I can't understand how anyone ever took that seriously. I mean, ever took it seriously.
Well, what are you reading?
Sentence by sentence, it's, I began with the Communist Manifesto that he and Engels wrote.
It's a magnificent, if you want a model for propaganda, it is the masterpiece.
But there's absolutely no contact with actual economic reality.
No, there's no need for that, as many people are showing. You can become president of the United States with no contact with economic reality. They had the one true faith. They were the vanguard of the proletariat.
In simple terms, Karl Marx divides society into categories relating to class: the ruling class, known as the bourgeoisie, and the working class, known as the proletariat, or indeed the oppressor and the victimized. And due to this perceived dynamic, Marx justifies dispossessing the rulers of their belongings in order to benefit the workers. Indeed, the communist believes himself to be some sort of modern-day Robin Hood, taking from the rich and giving to the poor, which no doubt is the appeal. But while this system of theft, or communism, serves as the foundation of woke ideology, the activist left push the boundaries even further, believing that Karl Marx didn't go far enough to bring about utopia. So not only do they want to dispossess us of our property and wealth, but also our rights, freedoms, civil liberties, opportunities, all natural resources, even our thoughts and emotions pursuant to an equitable society on the basis of one's identity characteristics. In fact, it is precisely for this reason that the Pride movement is associated with this ideology, as their flag is the embodiment of struggle based on identity. Indeed, it takes no stretch of the imagination to say that the Pride movement is the key driver of this ideology, and it has demonstrably infected our society and our institutions.
Subversion in Soviet terminology means always a destructive, aggressive activity aimed to destroy the country, nation, or geographical area of your enemy. It's most of this activity is overt, legitimate, and easily observable if you give yourself time and trouble to observe it. We think that subverter is a person who is going to blow up our beautiful bridges. No. Replace traditionally established institutions and organizations with fake organizations. Take away the initiative from people. Take away the responsibility from naturally established links between individuals, group of individuals, and society at large, and replace them with artificially, bureaucratically controlled bodies.
Before moving on, I want to present a list of words and phrases that essentially mean the same thing in essence or in practice, which is to say, dispossessing one person of something to benefit another. Marxism, communism, socialism, including democratic and national socialism, progressivism, leftism, the common good, equity, and also equality when uttered by a woke activist. Centralized government planning, control of the means of production and distribution, social welfare, benefits, subsidies, grants and allowances, quotas in the workplace on the basis of identity, and public services. I find the issue of public services to be very disheartening, in that many people complain about services being inadequate or not fit for purpose, never realizing that they are actually complaining about the failings of socialism. But make no mistake, every time you beg the government to solve your problems, you invite them to seize the means of production and distribution of the problem. For example, if you want the government to solve the problem of housing, you invite them to seize the means of production and distribution of housing. If you want the government to solve the problem of healthcare, you invite them to seize the means of production and distribution of healthcare. If you want them to solve the problem of hateful speech, you invite them to seize the means of production and distribution of language and emotion, and so on and so forth, until we have invited government to seize control of our lives, leaving us completely dependent with no alternative. So be careful what you wish for.
It's a funny thing. After the fall of communism, everybody in the world agreed that socialism was a failure. Everybody in the world, more or less, agreed that capitalism was a success. And every capitalist country in the world apparently deduced from that that what the West needed was more socialism.
While the Communist Manifesto serves as justification for dispossessing people of their rights and belongings, we must turn to the leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party, to determine who should be dispossessed and who should benefit from it. Whereas Marx was focused on taking from the ruling class for the benefit of the working class, the Führer would base his socialist model on the politics of identity. Under Hitler, it was not to be the proletariat against the bourgeois, but the Aryan race against the Jewish race, a notion that perfectly mimics the activism associated with the woke movement. Let me explain. In much the same way the Nazi regime dispossessed the Jew, so he may atone for the sin of being Jewish in order to improve the lot of the Aryan race. Woke activists demand that all white people are dispossessed for the crime of being white or for white privilege in order to improve the lot of non-whites who they claim are the victims of our whiteness.
White privilege.
White privilege. Middle class white man.
The white privileged man.
White privilege.
White, middle class, able-bodied, heterosexual men.
As mentioned earlier, this ideology is uniquely stupid, but let me continue. Woke activists demand that straight people are dispossessed to improve the lot of gays who were victimized by heteronormativity. They demand that men are dispossessed to benefit women who were victims of the patriarchy, that women are dispossessed for the benefit of trans women, and so on and so forth, on the train of forcefully seizing the means of production and distribution on the basis of identity characteristics until equity is achieved. Hence the reason why the pride flag was updated by dissenters who understood the historical connections between Nazism and wokeism. However, there is one minor difference. Hitler sought to seize the means of production and distribution from much of the world to benefit his people. In Ireland, the roles are reversed. Woke activists are attempting to seize the means of production and distribution from the Irish people in order to benefit the world. Examples of this kind of dispossession for the benefit of others can be viewed all around us. The redistribution of wealth from the Irish taxpayer to hundreds of landlords in order to benefit thousands of foreigners. Hate crime laws, hate speech legislation, and protest exclusion zones are all designed to seize the means of production and distribution of justice, thought, speech, emotion, and dissent, with a view to creating a new system that benefits people more or less on the basis of their identity characteristics. Even workplace quotas are an attempt to control who can and cannot work on the basis of their identity.
One thing I strongly agree with the Deputy on is the need to set a target to have a number of people from ethnic minorities in areas of the public service. We have a health service that's very diverse, although less so as you go up towards the senior positions, not so much in the Gardaí, not so much in the Defence Forces, not so much in the education sector, as the Deputy mentioned, not at all in the civil service, which is very white, including the Department of Equality, for example, and that actually needs to change. So we need to have, I think, a target for people who come from ethnic minority backgrounds, but also dedicated recruitment campaigns to encourage people, because we do need a generation of young people growing up in Ireland who are people of colour to see black and brown school principals, judges, Keen Corla perhaps in the future. Who knows? Visibility and opportunity is really important.
But while Nazism serves to justify robbing from you on the basis of your identity, wokeism transcends that barrier also. During the so-called pandemic, every unvaccinated person was dispossessed of his rights, freedoms, and civil liberties in order to benefit the vaccinated. Families are being dispossessed of their communities and their safety to benefit illegal immigrant men. Ireland herself was dispossessed of her sovereignty over the border in order to benefit foreigners. And more insidiously, children are being dispossessed of their innocence in order to benefit the sexually depraved. Indeed, once you understand how this toxic system of organisation ticks, you see evidence of it everywhere. All across Ireland, and indeed Western society, the woke establishment is constantly using force and coercion in order to rob people of their rights and belongings for the benefit of others, or indeed for the common good. It must also be said that if you dare call any of this stuff out, woke activists will attempt to destroy your reputation, rob you of your ability to feed yourself and your family, and they'll do everything possible to ensure your imprisonment. tactics no different to the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century, where if you dared to express dissent, disdain, or dissatisfaction, you found yourself persecuted and sent to a concentration camp, or a gulag, or a re-education camp, or indeed worse. They may smile and preach love, not hate. They may claim to be fighting racism, homophobia, or whatever fictitious form of oppression. But make no mistake, the tactics employed by these useful idiots are a blend of history's most destructive political philosophies, namely Marxism and Nazism, and every single word they utter or act they commit is specifically designed to force you into submission so they may dispossess you of your rights, freedoms, civil liberties, opportunities, property, wealth, thoughts, emotions, and all other resources for the common good.
If I see something that's wrong, I don't put up with it. If it's the law, then we can change it. Do I look like someone that's going to put up with hate crimes and violence and injustice?
Die Frage der Wiedergewinnung der inneren Kraft und Gesundheit des deutschen Volkes.
I now want to discuss fascism. If you were to listen to the woke activist types, you would assume that they are vehemently against fascism as a mechanism of control, but nothing could be farther from the truth. In order to premise this part of the video, I will offer a simple definition of fascism.
Socialism usually means the government ownership of the means of production. The pattern he's following is much more like that of the fascists, where the government leaves the means of production in private hands and the politicians tell them what to do. And that's much more politically viable because after the government forces the private industry to do something and it turns out disastrously, you can always haul the people from private industry up before congressional committees, denounce them on television and so forth, leaving out the fact that it was you who forced them to do what they did.
If you take issue with Dr. Sowell's understanding of fascism, you should be aware of the following.
Sowell is, he researches the shit out of this stuff. He really does his work.
In the simplest terms, fascism occurs when the government engages with private enterprise in order to pursue a political agenda. Taking into consideration this definition of fascism, I want to present the following statement which I have found to be a kind of truism. If you want to find the fascists in your society, simply criticize the government and watch who comes in to defend them. There was no greater example of fascism in recent times than our response to COVID-19, coming in the form of the Health Preservation Act. The Irish government, in partnership with Big Pharma, Big Tech, the mainstream media, supermarket chains, hotels, restaurants, pubs, and so on, put into place measures which sought to control the population and discriminate against the non-compliant as necessary. And who were the greatest supporters of these tyrannical measures? The woke activists. If you go to any social media account containing the following markers indicative of the woke mind virus and search for words like vaccine, COVID, lockdowns, masks, you will find that these fascist fucks not only begged for the government to implement harsher restrictions on human freedom, but they also called for the persecution of the non-compliant. And as far as I'm concerned, these murderous motherfuckers have blood on their hands.
We were delivered something wrongly called vaccines. We were propagandized into avoiding off-patent drugs that really did work. And so, we made our situation vastly worse. We locked down, which injured people. We put masks on children, which literally disrupted their normal developmental processes. We kept vaccinating and revaccinating, which has created an entire landscape of adverse events and early deaths, which we are still not being honest about.
More recently, the fascists of the EU and of the Irish government have been trying to force Elon Musk into censoring voices and opinions on Twitter in order to monopolize the flow of information. And can you guess who supports this fascistic intrusion into the free market? The woke activists. As mentioned, if it promotes their agenda or grants them power, they will support it. In closing this segment of the video, I wish to say the following. Communism, Nazism, and fascism as political philosophies, defined by tyranny, aren't exactly at odds with one another. They are similar enough that a new, more dangerous system can be created once the existing ones are carefully stripped of all dogmas which serve to complement each other. And I believe that the religion of wokeism is the bastard child of these tyrannical ideologies, pretending to be pity. And I hope I have convinced you of that also. Moving on, I will briefly offer my interpretation of other topics held dear by the woke mob. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity fractures society into various groups depending on political philosophy and identity characteristics before pitting them together in a struggle for power. It also serves as an attack on talent and merit, as woke Marxist ideologues empower other activists by placing them into positions of influence in order to take over institutions under the guise of creating a diverse space. Equity, as previously discussed, refers to the administration of shares, or communism. Inclusion is a term used to describe the various methods of bullying and persecution that serve to reinforce and protect diversity and equity. Multiculturalism. Multiculturalism fractures society into groups based on culture or ways of life that compete for dominance. It serves to create a deep sense of social disharmony and a low trust society, which in part is born out of the higher crime rates associated with this pursuit. You don't need to look too far to see the failures of this endeavour. However, the Marxist activist favours multiculturalism because it feeds their narcissistic sense of moral superiority, and it serves as the basis for discrimination and dispossession as previously described.
No society can be stable unless there is a basic, unthinking, unquestioning allegiance to certain common principles. You cannot possibly conduct a society, have agreement, unless that basic homogeneity and consensus exists. The political mechanism does least harm to the stability of a society in those societies that are most homogeneous and that have the closest approach to common values.
Education. Education in this country has shifted from teaching children how to think to teaching children what to think. Programs originally designed to transform children into competent and productive members of society have evolved incrementally to produce an army of activist morons who fight for their own enslavement, believing that they are ridding the world of oppression.
Hey guys, my name is Ava. And I'm Quiva. And today we're going to be showing you how we celebrated Stand Up Week 2023 in presentations. This is the all-inclusive bright flag that we have on display just at the top of our ramp that all of our students can see. Here in Press, we make a conscious effort to make sure that everybody feels included, respected, and seen in our school.
Here at the front of the school, we have a notice board where students can learn about the terminology of the LGBTQ+ community.
Sex education, which used to involve learning about the anatomy, sexual intercourse, and the development of pregnancy, has also evolved to include discussion about pornography, sexuality, and matters of sexual intimacy. Gender ideology has also made its way into the classrooms of primary school children, coming in the form of a cartoon endorsed by Tenny and the INTO. I have asked many leftist degenerates the following question with respect to sex education. Where is the academic value to be found in teaching children how to give blowjobs or in discussing matters of sexual intimacy? Needless to say, I have never received a satisfactory answer.
The fact is that queer theory, this idea that boundaries are bad, innately suspicious things, and that we can redefine everything, and we can turn the world upside down, that's very useful for paedophiles. So I think it's almost the other way around. So this is an ideology that is useful for paedophiles, so it will attract them.
Islam is yet another death cult that has been supported by the woke ideologues. I will make a case for resisting Islam without having to appeal to the atrocities its adherents have committed in service to Allah.
If I was to convert to Islam and follow the example of Muhammad, a man who spread the faith with the sword, who murdered people, butchered people, a man who took slaves, took sex slaves, a man who was a paedophile who married children, I would be celebrated in Irish society and I would receive a kind of protected status. But if I was to create a new religion with somebody like Jimmy Savile or Fred West as its central holy figure, I'd be vilified, I'd be threatened, and I'd probably be beaten or I'd probably lose my life.
I will also say that I view every mosque in this country as a monument to a man who was demonstrably evil, and anyone who wishes to adhere to this disgusting religion should do so 3,500 miles away, where it is acceptable. And if you're still not convinced, here's a question for you. Do you think that Islam will serve over time to enhance freedom in Ireland or harm freedom in Ireland? Palestine. Woke activists, being supremely moronic, have chosen to pick a side in this conflict under the misapprehension that Palestine and Ireland have a shared history. Even college students have been photographed with banners and flags in support of Hezbollah and Hamas, and sitting TDs have openly called for Islamic revolution. But let me set the record straight. My ancestors fought the soldiers of the British Army in service to a free Ireland, and Ireland for the Irish, and a future of peace and prosperity. The Islamic jihadis in Gaza violate and defile women and children, behead civilians, and kill anyone in their line of sight, not for freedom, not for peace, not even for land, but for Allah and for safe passage to heaven. How dare any of you misguided fucking vermin compare Ireland's patriot dead to these fucking barbarians? If I had my way, I would send you virtue signalling wasters to the front line so that you may live in accordance with your chants. Open borders and mass immigration. I am told that because Irish people who have nothing to do with me left Ireland generations ago for countries I never visited, that I now must appropriate their debt and accept thousands of Africans, Syrians, Afghans, Indians, Pakistanis, Algerians, Georgians, and whatever else, and take on the demographic, cultural, and financial cost associated with that notion. I am to shut up and accept open borders for a world of freeloaders during a crisis of scarcity. I am to relinquish my culture and my way of life because somebody who wasn't me left Ireland several lifetimes ago. Needless to say, you can shove that emotional argument into the deepest, darkest regions of your fucking hole. There's this thing now, right, where the lefties
are calling themselves unvetted males, as if to announce yourself as an unvetted male is evidence that all unvetted males are nice, happy, tolerant people, no matter where they come from, right? They would lead you to believe that a 25-year-old unvetted male from Connemara or Athlone or Dalkey, right, would have exactly the same in common and hold the same set of values as a 25-year-old unvetted male from Mumbai, from Karachi, from the Golan Heights, from Addis Ababa, from Asmara, from N'Djamena, from Monrovia. You name it. This is how stupid these people are. Well, I tell you what, I encourage you to visit these places and bring your pride flag and tell me how you get on, you dopes.
Here's another example of Marxist logic to further highlight this stupidity. If a man breaks into my house, he is a criminal. If a man breaks into my country, he's not a criminal, but rather he is a beneficiary who should be rewarded with taxpayer wealth and assets, and if you complain about it, you're a racist. Needless to say, proponents of this remarkably retarded proposition are history's dumbest bastards.
No, I think it is essential to have a secure border. I mean, you're really not a country unless you have a
Correct.
secure border,
And secure elections,
you
too.
know, yeah, absolutely secure elections, and so it's just essential to have a real border, or we can't function as a country, and our service, our central services are being overwhelmed in a lot of cities.
We, the people of Ireland, deserve safety and security in our own country. We also have a God-given or natural right to live in accordance with our own values and practice our own culture without fear of reprisal. Ireland belongs to the Irish. End of story. In closing, I wish to say the following. We share this country with people who are afflicted with a kind of sickness that endangers humanity itself. Around the world, Western cities are burning in response to madness cultivated by people who are as stupid as they are tyrannical. No amount of logic, reason, or evidence will ever penetrate their warped minds. And believe me, I've tried. Ask them about the death toll in Stalin's Russia, Mao's China, or Pot's Cambodia, and they'll tell you that wasn't real communism. Show them the graves of Aisling Murphy, Aidan Moffat, Michael Snee and others, and they'll tell you that's not real multiculturalism. Show them the blood-stained streets after 3 children and their teacher were stabbed, and they'll cry about a burnt-out bus. Believe me when I tell you, these fucking scumbags celebrate every head smashed, every face pepper sprayed, and every man and woman arrested. In fact, they would tell you the state doesn't go far enough. And just like Hitler tried to eradicate the Jews out of hatred, the Marxist will eradicate the Gael out of stupidity and narcissism. Finally, next time you hear the woke mob screaming fascist or racist or Nazi scum off our streets, remember, the iron law of woke projection never misses.